Hey guys, tonight we're about to tuck you in with something even more chilling than your grandma's casserole from 1978. Life inside a 1950s American mental asylum. That's right. Tonight, you're not a TikTok scroller in fuzzy socks. You're a patient in a world where your doctor prescribes cigarettes, your roommate thinks he's Abraham Lincoln, and the only Wi-Fi in the building is whatever's crawling on the sheets. But before you get comfortable and drift off to the soft background hum of existential dread, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and, honestly, what you'd get institutionalized for if this was 1952. Personally, I'd be in the padded room for chronic sarcasm. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that distant, comforting white noise, and get as cozy as you can. Pull your blanket tight, just make sure there aren't any wandering hands from the next bunk over. But let's pause and let the questions spiral for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to be locked up for hysteria because you didn't smile enough at breakfast? Did anyone in a white coat actually know what they were doing, or was it just a nationwide science fair gone wrong? What did the food taste like when the chef's only spice was extra despair? How much electric shock therapy was too much electric shock therapy? Did anyone ever escape? Or did everyone just daydream about it while staring at the world through reinforced glass? Could you survive group therapy with a dozen strangers and a nurse with the emotional warmth of a snowman? Would you last a week without going completely, well, you know? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in a 1950s American asylum. You're wearing someone else's slippers. You don't know where your toothbrush is, and your neighbour is reciting the Gettysburg Address backwards. Good luck. The first thing you notice is the smell. A delicate blend of bleach, sweat, and ancient pudding. You've barely had time to process the word asylum before someone hands you a clipboard and a paper gown that's 2 sizes too small. The intake nurse asks you questions with the empathy of a DMV worker in a thunderstorm. Congratulations. You have officially entered the most confusing job interview of your life, except the job is, try not to panic, and the only benefit package is a lifetime supply of unscented soap. The nurse rattles off questions at a speed that suggests she's training for the mental Olympics. Any allergies? Any violent tendencies? Any idea what year it is? On a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to climb out a window before lunch? You try to answer, but she's already checking boxes and writing non-compliant entries in your file because you blinked too slowly. Let's talk about your outfit. If you've ever worn one of those backless hospital gowns, you know the feeling. Exposed, confused, and vaguely chilly. Now imagine it's made out of recycled sandpaper, and it comes in a stunning shade of government-issue oatmeal. No drawstring, no dignity, and definitely no pockets. The only accessory you get is a wristband with your name, birthday, and a barcode, just in case you try to sneak out and get mistaken for next week's laundry. And then there's the waiting room, a true masterpiece of institutional design. The walls are painted a colour that can only be described as hospital sadness. The chairs are bolted to the floor, spaced exactly far enough apart that you can't whisper to the other nervous arrivals, but close enough that you can hear every sniffle, sigh, and the occasional unsettling giggle from behind the admin desk. There's a plant in the corner that's been dead since the Truman administration, and a clock that ticks so loudly it sounds like it's counting down to your next mistake. The nurse hands you a pen that's attached to a plastic chain, as if the greatest threat to the hospital's security is someone absconding with the world's most unreliable BIC. You try to fill out the paperwork, but the questions get weirder. Do you hear voices? Sometimes. Do you want to harm yourself or others? Well, you'd like to have a word with the person who invented this chair, but otherwise you're fine. Are you allergic to wool, shellfish, or authority? You hesitate. No one wants to get put on the extra observations list before lunch. Every so often a door opens and someone shuffles in, shuffles out, or just stares at the wall like they're waiting for it to do something interesting. Your name is finally called, and you're led down a hallway lined with inspirational posters from a parallel universe. "Every day is a new beginning," proclaims one, next to a picture of a butterfly who looks like it's considering escape. As you walk, you pass staff members with the unique ability to make eye contact and look right through you at the same time. It's a talent you didn't know existed outside family reunions. You're weighed, measured, and asked to recite the day, month, and president. For the record, Eisenhower is always a safe guess in the 1950s, even if it's not strictly correct. Before you can get your bearings, you're in a tiny office where a man in a white coat reads your answers and makes small humming noises. He asks if you know why you're here. You try honesty, never a good idea in this place. He writes insight, questionable. You want to ask if that's the diagnosis or just a general vibe. By the time you're assigned your bed, you've been prodded, poked, and processed like a slice of industrial cheese. You realise that somewhere between the questionnaire, the gown, and the signature on the bottom of your intake form, you left Kansas a long time ago. You're not sure where you are, but you're definitely not in charge, and you still have no idea what's for lunch. Punchline: welcome to your new reality. You may not know the rules yet, but you'll learn them fast. Or else. You thought your worst day was that time you split your pants at a wedding, but this is a new low. Shoes off, belt gone, even your hairpins confiscated, just in case you are planning a daring escape or a mildly rebellious hairstyle. Let's set the scene. You're in a chilly, windowless room that somehow manages to combine the privacy of an open bus stop with the atmosphere of a haunted laundromat. Two orderlies, one built like a retired linebacker, the other with the suspiciously chipper energy of someone who's had too much instant coffee, gently but firmly explain the rules. The first rule: there's no such thing as privacy. The second: if you can hide it in a sock, you can definitely lose it at the door. They ask you to empty your pockets, but you've already been stripped of most of your worldly possessions. What's left is inspected with the kind of thoroughness you'd expect from airport security if airports were run by your least favourite gym teacher. Got a comb? Hand it over. That paperback novel? Not allowed. Someone once used Little Women to tunnel into the adjacent broom closet. Is that a button with a sharp edge? Nice try, Houdini. It goes in the forbidden box with all the other micro-weapons. Bobby pins, shoelaces, that one Lego you found in your coat pocket. Now you're told to take off your gown, a garment so flimsy it qualifies more as an existential concept than as clothing. As you stand there in the all-together, the orderlies do their best not to stare, but you can tell they've seen everything. It's a mutual, unspoken agreement. You pretend this isn't the most humiliating moment of your adult life, and they pretend you're the first person who's ever blushed in here. The air is cold, but the silence is colder. Somewhere, a clock ticks in judgment. Let's talk sensory detail. The linoleum is sticky under your bare feet, and the fluorescent lights overhead are so harsh they could double as interrogation lamps. You're handed a tiny bar of soap and pointed toward a shower stall that promises sanitation in theory, but smells like it's seen 1,000 desperate attempts at scrubbing away anxiety. There's no curtain, naturally. Wouldn't want you hiding a razor blade behind a polyester ruffle. You do your best, speed washing with institutional soap that leaves you both squeaky clean and slightly more brittle than before. After the world's shortest shower, you get the official inspection. The staff checks your hair, your hands, even the soles of your feet, in case you've attempted to smuggle in a secret message or the last shreds of your self-respect. There's a moment when you lock eyes with one of the orderlies and you both silently agree. Let's never speak of this again. The new wardrobe arrives. Hospital-issue pyjamas and a robe made from a fabric best described as vintage sandpaper. You're allowed slippers with rubber soles, but they have the style and arch support of overcooked pancakes. If you were hoping for a comfy pair of socks, dream on. You're here for safety, not spa day. As you get dressed, Someone checks your ears for earrings and your teeth for anything that might double as a lockpick. You're pretty sure this is all overkill, but then again, this is the 1950s. They've seen it all, from paperclip jailbreaks to elaborate escape attempts involving nothing but chewing gum and determination. By the time they finish, you've lost not just your belongings, but any illusions of modesty. Your dignity is in a small plastic bin, sitting somewhere between a broken pen and a deck of playing cards missing the Queen of Hearts. You're officially ready for your close-up as patient 1074, the newest inmate in a world where personal space is a rumour, privacy is a punchline, and your best hope for feeling human again is remembering that everyone, staff included, is just as weirded out by this process as you are. And the punchline? Just when you think it's over, someone comes back to ask if you're comfortable. You nod, wrapped in your dignity-proof robe, and realise the answer is no, but give it a few days. You get shown to your bed, one lumpy mattress among a lineup of characters you'd usually only meet at a midnight Waffle House. There's the guy who speaks fluent Morse code, a chronic knitter, and someone who claims to have invented rain. Welcome to your new habitat. The nurse waves a hand, gesturing vaguely at the rows of mismatched cots and the swirling circus of humanity occupying them. If you thought you were the only person having a rough decade, think again. Here, everyone is either waiting for their next big break or their next round of tranquilizers. You learn fast. There's no such thing as normal on this ward, only degrees of eccentricity measured by how loudly your roommate snores or how many times a day the knitter finishes another woolen square. Let's talk about the ambience. The air buzzes with the unique harmony of muttered conversations, coughs, and the constant scrape of a chair leg as the Morse code guy taps out what you hope isn't a call for help. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead, casting everyone in a sickly greenish glow that would make even Hollywood starlets look like extras in a zombie movie. The walls are adorned with hand-drawn motivational posters, "Today is a new day," decorated in crayon, and the faint scent of industrial-strength cleaning fluid never quite drowns out the undertone of gym socks and nervous sweat. Your bed is sandwiched between two veterans of the asylum. On your left is Millie, whose knitting needles have somehow escaped the strip search process for decades. She's always working on something, a scarf, a sweater, or possibly a life-sized woolen replica of the doctor's moustache. She claims to be knitting for the children, though you've never seen any children, only piles of tangled yarn and the occasional half-finished mitten. On your right is Frank, who's convinced that the government controls the weather and is determined to outsmart it with a homemade tinfoil hat and vigorous lectures about cloud seeding. When he's not sharing meteorological conspiracies, he's offering unsolicited advice on how to make instant coffee using only a radiator and the power of positive thinking. There's no privacy here, just a thin curtain you can pull half closed, mostly for show, since everyone can still hear every word, every night terror, every whispered confession. You soon discover that your fellow inmates are both your greatest trial and your only entertainment. There's Dorothy, who organises nightly sing-alongs of pop songs from 1937. Phil, who claims to be in a witness protection program and refers to himself exclusively as the Falcon. And Cheryl, who keeps a detailed log of everyone's bathroom habits in a little notebook labelled Top Secret. Nights are an adventure. Just as you start to drift off, the Morse code guy taps out what might be the entire Gettysburg Address in dots and dashes. Someone across the room starts humming, a slow, off-key lullaby that is either deeply soothing or mildly unsettling depending on your mood. There's always the threat of snoring, some light, some heroic, all of it echoing off the tile floors like a herd of over-caffeinated walruses. You try to set boundaries, but the concept is as foreign here as free Wi-Fi. Millie asks if you want to learn to knit, and before you can say maybe later, she's teaching you the pearl stitch using a strand of dental floss. Frank corners you for a spirited discussion about rain patterns and offers to predict tomorrow's weather if you'll just tell him what phase the moon is in. You learn to nod, smile, and keep your answers vague. After all, you never know what might set off a passionate debate about cloud cover. By the third night, you realise something strange. In a world this unpredictable, the chaos itself becomes comforting. You find yourself almost looking forward to the nightly Morse code recitals and the chance to see what new masterpiece Millie has produced. Sure, it's noisy, crowded, and absolutely nothing like home, but at least you're never bored. And if you ever forget why you ended up here, just listen. There's always someone happy to explain, in detail, and usually at full volume. Punchline. The human zoo isn't so bad once you accept that you're one of the exhibits. Just smile, wave, and enjoy the show. Forget designer labels. Your new wardrobe is the colour of despair and fits like it was designed by a committee of blindfolded raccoons. No pockets, of course, because you might stash your hopes in there. Welcome to the pinnacle of 1950s psychiatric chic, where every outfit screams I gave up, and all I got was this institutional smock. The moment you change into your hospital pyjamas, you realise you have entered a parallel universe where the only accessory anyone wants is the exit sign. The fabric is a cross between burlap and something that might once have been cotton, before all the joy was chemically removed. The fit. Imagine a trash bag with sleeves but less breathable. Let's talk colour. This season's collection offers a dazzling spectrum ranging from washed-out blue to greyish tan, officially known as Psych Ward Taupe. Everything is the exact shade of sadness you get when you spill coffee on your last clean shirt before a job interview. Patterns are strictly forbidden. The only thing more dangerous than a patient with a plan is a patient with a hint of personal style. And the fit? Hospital pyjamas defy every law of tailoring known to mankind. The pants are always 3 inches too short or pooling around your ankles like you've borrowed them from a much taller ghost. The top has armholes that seem specifically designed to expose your least favourite features. Somehow the collar is both too tight and gaping open, as if daring you to complain just so the nurse can remind you. It's for your safety, dear. There's also the issue of closures. Buttons are out. Can't have you swallowing them in a moment of existential crisis. Instead, you get a series of mismatched snaps that work about as well as New Year's resolutions in February. If you're lucky, your robe comes with a fabric belt, which is ceremoniously removed at bedtime for fear you'll do something rash, like try to keep your robe closed in a drafty hallway. Pockets, as you noticed, are strictly forbidden. There is nowhere to hide your contraband graham crackers, your dignity, or, more importantly, your hands when you're standing around trying not to look awkward during roll call. You stand there, arms dangling at your sides, looking like an undercooked breadstick at a group therapy buffet. The absence of pockets is the asylum's way of reminding you that nothing here is private, not even your lint. Let's not forget footwear. Slippers, issued in a one-size-fits-no-one policy, are the only option. They come in a neutral, not found in nature beige, and have the structural integrity of wet cardboard. If you want arch support, you'll need to request a transfer to the orthopaedic wing, or develop some very creative towel folding techniques. Socks are rare and prized, usually reserved for those with good behaviour or cold feet and a persuasive argument. More than once, you'll catch someone bartering an extra pudding cup for a clean pair. Showers offer a unique fashion opportunity, the ever-stylish hospital towel. These towels are so thin you could use them to filter coffee. They barely wrap around your waist, so there's always a risk of accidental moonlight, especially on your way back to the room, clutching it like a contestant in a very low-budget game show. If you try to personalise your look, a cuffed sleeve here, a rebellious roll of the waistband there, the staff will gently but firmly unroll, untuck and restore you to the uniform standard. Individuality is not on the approved treatment plan, but on the plus side, there's never any confusion about what to wear each morning. If it's clean, it's yours. If it's stained, it's probably still yours. After a few days, you start to forget what normal clothes feel like. Jeans become a myth. T-shirts a memory, and anything with a zipper seems as exotic as a silk kimono. But you adapt. Everyone does. In this world, fashion is just another way to remind you that outside doesn't exist, and self-expression is a dangerous hobby. Still, if you squint, you can almost convince yourself that you and your fellow patients are part of a new trend. Call it Asylum core. Who knows? Maybe it'll catch on. Punchline. At least you don't have to worry about what to wear to dinner. Here, every night is a pajama party and no one's having fun. At the asylum, mornings start before the sun, before hope, and definitely before anyone's ready. A nurse with the bedside manner of a drill sergeant flips on the lights, and you're greeted by the jarring symphony of snoring, muttering, and bedpans. No matter what you were dreaming about, a soft bed, a world with private bathrooms, maybe a quick escape via magic flying carpet, it all comes crashing down at exactly 5 a.m. You're yanked from slumber not by the gentle caress of sunlight, but by the flicker and hum of institutional fluorescent bulbs, engineered for maximum discomfort and zero ambience. The lights flicker on with the subtlety of a stadium spotlight, and your first coherent thought is that you'd sell your soul for 5 more minutes of darkness. The nurse, whose hobbies clearly include waking people up and not taking nonsense, stomps down the aisle in crepe-soled shoes that somehow manage to squeak with every step. She barks, "Rise and shine!" with the enthusiasm of someone who's never experienced joy or the concept of sleeping in. Her job is not to gently ease you into consciousness, it's to make sure you are upright, accounted for, and at least pretending to be grateful. The room itself is a disaster zone. Blankets are tangled, patients are scattered at odd angles across their beds, and the air is thick with the aroma of feet, cold oatmeal, and something vaguely medicinal. The symphony of snoring halts abruptly, replaced by a chorus of groans. Some folks try bargaining for a little more sleep. "Just 10 more minutes," they plead, their voices hopeful. The nurse laughs, a sound so devoid of warmth it could curdle milk. As you sit up, your back makes a noise reminiscent of a creaky attic door. You scan the room. One roommate is already halfway through his morning Morse code transmission, tapping out what you can only assume is SOS. Millie the knitter has somehow managed to create a new scarf overnight, and Frank is giving a groggy weather report to anyone who will listen. You reach for your slippers, only to find that they've migrated under the next bed, probably looking for better living conditions. Personal hygiene is next. Everyone shuffles to the communal bathroom, clutching their dignity and the world's tiniest bar of soap. The line is long, patience is short, and the water is cold enough to wake the dead. Someone tries to comb their hair with a plastic fork, an act of rebellion, or just wishful thinking, it's hard to tell. If you're lucky, you get 2 minutes of tepid water and a cracked mirror that turns every face into a modernist art project. You stare at your reflection, wondering if this is what Picasso meant by his blue period. Breakfast follows, and the transition is as smooth as a gravel road. You're herded to the dining hall, a bright, echoing space filled with the comforting aroma of mystery porridge. The food appears to be the same every morning, as if someone made a lifetime supply during the Hoover administration, and has been working through it ever since. The meal is accompanied by weak coffee, and the desperate hope that, just once, the toast will actually be toasted. The staff insists breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Judging by the faces around you, important is a relative term. Most people look like they're reconsidering every life choice that led them here, starting with getting out of bed. Frank offers his theory that the oatmeal is secretly a government experiment. You consider that he might be onto something, especially after a third spoonful. By 6 a.m, you're washed, dressed, fed, and vaguely aware of your own existence. The nurse checks off names on her clipboard, occasionally glancing up to make sure no one's tried to sneak back under the covers. There's a brief moment of stillness as everyone stares out the barred window, watching a sky that's still dark and wondering how many more mornings like this you can survive. Punchline, and as you line up for medication, bleary-eyed and half awake, you realize somewhere out there, people are still sleeping, but not here, not you, not ever again. Welcome to 5 a.m. and regret. Ever wondered what happens to all the food that doesn't make it onto real-world menus? Welcome to the Asylum cafeteria. The porridge could be concrete, the coffee is somehow both scalding and cold, and every meal is served with a generous side of confusion. You shuffle in, guided by the kind of institutional efficiency usually reserved for prison camps and kindergarten lunchrooms. There's a scent in the air, equal parts burnt toast, disinfectant, and something that can only be described as unresolved trauma. Today's special is Mystery Meat Monday, but honestly, every day might as well be called Mystery Something. You line up with your fellow patients, each clutching a plastic tray like it's the last remaining lifeboat on the Titanic. A woman in a hairnet stands behind the counter, wielding a ladle with the casual menace of someone who's seen too much. She slaps a greyish lump onto your plate, calls it sausage, and moves on before you can ask any follow-up questions. Is it pork? Is it chicken? Is it some kind of medical experiment gone wrong? No one knows, and no one wants to be the first to find out. The porridge is legendary in the worst possible way. It sits in your bowl, daring you to poke it with a spoon. The consistency is somewhere between quick-drying cement and the kind of paste you used to eat in elementary school before people started worrying about nutrition. It's lukewarm in the middle, crusty on top, and if you flip it over, it holds its shape like a sand castle. Some say if you listen closely you can hear it plotting its escape. The coffee is a triumph of industrial science, simultaneously too hot to drink and too cold to enjoy. It arrives in a chipped ceramic mug, already halfway evaporated, and tastes like someone strained it through an old sock. You stare into its murky depths and wonder if today is the day you finally develop the superpowers everyone promised you as a child. As you scan the cafeteria, you realize breakfast is not just about eating, it's a psychological test. Some patients eye their food with the stoic resignation of Roman gladiators. Others trade bites of toast or dollops of jelly like black market commodities. If you're lucky, you might score a single-serve carton of milk, expiry date unknown, flavour unpredictable. Someone once got a banana, and the whole ward buzzed about it for weeks like it was a celebrity sighting. Let's talk about seating. The tables are long and communal, the kind that force you into awkward conversations before your brain has fully rebooted. There's always that one guy who claims the end seat every morning, building a fortress of napkins and glaring at anyone who approaches. Your regular spot becomes sacred territory, a sliver of stability in a world where the only guarantee is that the oatmeal will taste like wet cardboard. If you attempt to customize your meal, toasted bread, maybe a sprinkle of sugar on the porridge, the staff gently remind you, with a look that could curdle milk, that creativity is not part of the treatment plan. Seasoning? Forget it. Salt and pepper shakers are locked up somewhere with the sharp objects and all the interesting books. You make do with what you have and learn to appreciate the subtle notes of institutional despair. Conversations over breakfast are surreal too. Millie debates whether the egg is actually egg. Frank launches into another theory about how the CIA is controlling the coffee supply. The Morse code guy taps out SOS using a fork and half a slice of dry toast. You realise that here, the line between coping mechanism and breakfast ritual is alarmingly thin. By the end of the meal you're not full, but you're something. Maybe it's resolve, maybe it's heartburn. Maybe it's a newfound respect for anyone who manages to swallow more than 3 bites without asking existential questions about the origin of cafeteria sausage. Punchline. As you return your tray and try to forget the taste of concrete porridge, you wonder, if breakfast really is the most important meal of the day, What does that say about the rest of your life here? Bon appétit. Twice a day, a nurse wheels around a cart loaded with tiny paper cups. Each contains a handful of pills in colours not found in nature. You're told to swallow first, ask questions never, and don't even think about refusing unless you enjoy group therapy on anger management. The parade begins at precisely 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. with the arrival of the ward's resident pharmacist-in-chief, Nurse Gloria. She has the brisk efficiency of a seasoned blackjack dealer and the warm, caring aura of a department store mannequin. The wheels of her metal cart squeak and rattle down the hallway like a haunted ice cream truck. Only instead of childhood joy, it dispenses mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, and vitamins with side effects that sound like rejected horror movie pitches. Each stop on the parade is a carefully orchestrated routine. The nurse calls your name, you shuffle over in your slippers, and she squints at your chart to make sure you're not trying to pull a fast one. She hands you a paper cup brimming with pills that look like someone's entire crayon collection melted and reformed under duress. There's the pink one, may cause drowsiness or sudden existential dread. The blue one, possible side effects, dry mouth, vivid dreams, spontaneous poetry. And the beige one that, frankly, looks suspiciously like an after-dinner mint. Open wide, says Nurse Gloria. You oblige because arguing over the breakfast table is one thing, but arguing over medication is how you get labelled non-compliant and fast-tracked for an extra session of emotional charades. She watches you swallow like a hawk monitoring a particularly unreliable worm, then checks your tongue with a flashlight for evidence of cheeking, the timeless art of pretending to take your medicine while actually plotting to spit it into the nearest potted plant. Somewhere in the lineup, Frank is already asking if he can trade his yellow tablet for a blue one, convinced the blue ones help him see through walls. Millie, ever the knitter, tries to sneak her dose into a yarn stash. She claims it adds texture. The Morse code guy taps out what may or may not be a coded request for a placebo, and the rest of the ward silently calculates how many more cups until freedom, or at least until the side effects wear off. The whole process has the energy of a game show, but the prizes are confusion, cottonmouth, and maybe a mild sedative. If you try to question what any of these pills actually do, the nurse responds with a look that says, "Do you really want to find out?" She'll flip to a page in a 3-ring binder, recite something that sounds almost medical, then steer you to the water fountain with a nudge that means stop thinking and start swallowing. The afternoon parade is more of the same, just with a slightly more desperate flavour. Some patients have mastered the art of identifying pills by their aftertaste alone. Others play medication bingo, checking off symptoms as they appear. Dry eyes, weird dreams, the urge to write a musical about vitamin B12. At least once a week, someone gets a new pill to try, a treatment adjustment that is announced with the same excitement as a surprise pop quiz. Of course, every ward has its rebels. There's always one person who spits the pills into their sleeve, someone else who claims to be allergic to everything except pudding, and the odd patient who tries to convince the nurse they're cured and just need a nice walk in the sun. But Nurse Gloria has seen every trick. Her catchphrase, "Take your meds, or the meds will take you." Punchline. As the cart disappears down the hallway, you're left counting the minutes until the next round. In the asylum, the only thing more regular than medication time is the realization that, for better or worse, you've just swallowed your freedom, one tablet at a time. Circle up in plastic chairs. Today's activity is telling strangers about your feelings, while being stared at by a doctor who writes non-compliant every time you hesitate. Bonus points if you manage not to laugh during someone's third story about alien abduction. Group therapy isn't a circle of trust. It's more like a semi-annual performance review, except everyone is wearing pajamas and nobody's getting promoted. You take your seat and immediately notice the decor. A faded motivational poster on the wall. Feelings are valid. A wilting plant that clearly gave up years ago, and a giant clock that ticks louder than your internal monologue. The session leader is Dr. Goodwin, a man whose glasses are permanently fogged and whose expression hovers somewhere between deep concern and existential regret. He opens the group by reminding everyone, in a tone best suited for hostage negotiations, that sharing is caring and that there are no wrong answers, except the ones you don't say out loud. He then gestures for the dreaded feelings ball, a rubber sphere decorated with faded smiley faces and mysterious stains. The rules are simple. The person holding the feelings ball has to speak. If you drop it, you're up next. The first patient launches into a monologue about being abducted by aliens, again, which sets the bar high for vulnerability, but also low for factual accuracy. By the time the ball reaches you, it's slightly sticky and has picked up at least 3 new germs. You muster a vague comment about feeling a little off, only to see Dr. Goodwin scribbling guarded, needs prompting on his clipboard. There's a game of emotional bingo happening, whether you like it or not. The squares include cries unexpectedly, mentions childhood pet, blames the government, and stares at the ceiling for a full minute. Some patients treat group as open mic night, others as an endurance sport. Millie the knitter shares a heartfelt story about losing her favourite scarf for the 3rd time this week, while Frank argues that the group is probably being monitored by the CIA through the fluorescent lights. The real challenge is the unspoken contest. How many therapy cliches can you drop before the session ends? I feel unheard. I'm working on boundaries, and sometimes I just need to centre myself are all solid bets. If you can say processing my trauma 3 times without making eye contact, you're basically winning. The session is peppered with active listening exercises, which means you're supposed to nod sagely, while someone else explains how their breakfast cereal triggered a memory of lost love. You try your best to look engaged, but after the 3rd story about space reptiles and government weather balloons, your mind wanders to the one real mystery. What's for lunch, and will it be less mysterious than the last group confession? For Dr. Goodwin, group therapy is a data collection marathon. He asks follow-up questions like, "And how did that make you feel?" in a way that suggests he's not allowed to leave until everyone has experienced at least one minor emotional breakthrough. If you dare to crack a joke or worse, laugh at someone else's story, you're rewarded with a look of pure disappointment and a mental note that probably follows you into your next evaluation. There's always 1 or 2 patients who refuse to speak. Instead, they stare into the middle distance, arms crossed, daring anyone to pass them the feelings ball. You can respect their game. In here, silence is a kind of power until the doctor assigns extra individual counselling as punishment for emotional mutiny. By the end of the session, you've heard more confessions than a priest on Christmas Eve. Some are heartbreakingly real, some are pure science fiction, and most are met with a group chorus of thank you for sharing. The group disperses, each person returning to their corner of the human zoo slightly lighter, or, in some cases, more confused than before. Punchline. And you. You survived another round of emotional bingo, collected a new label or 2, and earned a fresh appreciation for the ancient art of not making eye contact. Only 5 more sessions until freedom, or until you start seeing aliens yourself. Time has no meaning here. Breakfast blends into therapy, which blends into lunch, which blends into more therapy. Every hour is announced by a bell that somehow makes you more anxious than you were before. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to live inside a broken clock, welcome to the Asylum's daily grind. There's a schedule printed on a crumpled sheet taped to the wall, but it might as well be written in ancient hieroglyphics. Every block of time is just another episode in a never-ending rerun. Morning routine, group activity, quiet time. These sound like promising invitations, but in reality, they're just synonyms for be somewhere and pretend to look interested. You start your day, as always, with the sacred ritual of roll call, followed by the sacred ritual of remembering which day it is. There's a vague sense that Monday might be different from Thursday, but the only real way to tell is by the rotation of mystery meat in the cafeteria and how many cups of medication you've already swallowed. Sometimes, in a flash of optimism, you check the window for sunlight, but the weather is always fluorescent and the view is always the same. The courtyard, the fence, and the one squirrel who seems to have a better escape plan than anyone inside. The day is broken up into units, all carefully monitored by staff wielding clipboards and looks of mild suspicion. After breakfast, there's occupational therapy, where you're invited to express yourself through lopsided ceramics, watercolour blobs, or, if you're frank, building a scale model of the hospital out of mashed potatoes. This is followed by quiet time, which in practice is neither quiet nor particularly timed. Some patients nap. Others attempt to read ancient magazines or just stare at the ceiling, trying to remember if they've lived this exact hour before. Next up, group therapy. Yes, again. It's just as soul-bearing as before, but with more yawning and slightly less enthusiasm. You learn that in the asylum, time is not measured by clocks, but by how many times you've had to discuss your feelings about breakfast. After group, it's back to the lounge, where the only entertainment is a battered deck of cards and a TV mounted so high on the wall it might actually be an experiment in neck mobility. The TV is always tuned to the news or static, and every attempt to change the channel is met with a polite but firm "that's not part of your treatment plan." Lunch arrives, and it's a blur. Sometimes there's a hint of spice or something masquerading as fruit, but mostly it's just a replay of breakfast with a different label. After lunch, there's more therapy, or recreation time, which involves sitting outside for a precious half hour, weather and institutional mercy permitting. You shuffle around the yard, careful not to step on the only flower, while a nurse with sunglasses and a stopwatch counts heads, like she's training for the FBI. Afternoons stretch out into an endless grey. The only way to distinguish between them is by who's snoring the loudest during quiet time, and whether or not you can hear Millie's knitting needles click from across the room. Occasionally, there's a special event, movie day, or a visiting motivational speaker who once wrote a book called Finding Joy in Bureaucracy. Nobody's read it, but the cover gets a lot of mileage. Evenings are for more medication, another meal, and some vague attempt at relaxation. Usually a puzzle missing half its pieces or a meditation tape played on a cassette deck that predates Elvis. By the time lights out rolls around, you've achieved the highest possible state of institutional enlightenment, total time confusion. Punchline. In here, every day is Groundhog Day, but with fewer laughs and more paperwork. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the bell ringing for tomorrow's breakfast. Or maybe that's just your imagination, trying to keep hope on the schedule. Once a week, you get to sit in a linoleum room and pretend your family doesn't blame you for the inconvenience. Everyone brings you fruit. Nobody brings you freedom, and the small talk is excruciating. The linoleum shines with that high-gloss anxiety unique to places where nobody really wants to be, including the furniture. There are folding chairs set up in uneven rows, and a rickety table covered in an army of bruised bananas, slightly sweaty grapes, and a grocery store apple that might outlast the Cold War. At one end of the room, a nurse hovers, her only job to make sure nobody passes you a hacksaw, baked inside a fruitcake, or starts a family feud over the quality of the Get Well cards. You hear your name called and your visitors, let's call them the troupe, shuffle in with the enthusiasm of a jury summoned for an especially tedious trial. Mum clutches a plastic bag full of vitamin C and guilt. Dad's got the strained smile of a man who'd rather be fixing the car. Your sister checks her watch every 2 minutes. If you're really lucky, a distant cousin materializes, clearly drafted at the last minute because it'll be good for you to see family. Conversations start with the weather, detour into local news, did you hear about Mrs. Parker's cat? And quickly stall out. There's a silent mutual agreement to avoid the subject of your current living arrangements. Instead, everyone overcompensates. "You look well," says Mom, as if fresh air and concrete walls are the secret to glowing skin. "Are they feeding you enough?" Dad ventures, eyeing your cafeteria pallor. "Do you have hobbies here?" your sister asks, as if the facility's a summer camp and not a crash course in pharmaceutical roulette. Fruit is pressed upon you as if it holds the key to your release. "Eat something," someone urges, and for a moment all conversation halts so you can demonstrate your ability to peel a banana in front of a live audience. You take a bite. Everyone relaxes, as if the act of digesting potassium is proof that you're on the road to recovery. There's always the hope, spoken or unspoken, that you'll say something magical and reassuring like, "I'll be out soon," or "I'm learning so much about myself." But you're just trying to make the visit less awkward than the cafeteria meatloaf. Sometimes someone brings news from the outside, a new neighbour, a sale at the department store, the tragic demise of Aunt Martha's ficus. It's meant to ground you in the real world, but instead it just reminds you that the real world is still spinning without your input. Midway through the visit, you glance at the clock, willing the minutes to pass faster. But time in the visiting room is a cruel trickster. 5 minutes feels like 50, and every conversation topic has to be wrung dry before you're allowed to escape. You notice other patients across the room, enduring the same forced smiles and fruit baskets. A few lucky ones get homemade cookies or a paperback novel. One guy's uncle brings him a rubber ball, contraband, swiftly confiscated by the nurse, who places it on the forbidden shelf next to last month's crossword puzzle and dreams. The end of visiting hours arrives with the subtlety of a fire drill. Everyone stands, exchanges stiff hugs or awkward pats on the back, and tries to end on an encouraging note. "Keep your chin up. We'll come again soon. Don't eat all the grapes at once." The troupe shuffles away, already mentally planning their next grocery run, leaving you in the echo of squeaky shoes and unresolved conversations. Punchline: you watch the door swing shut and realise the truest thing about visiting day. Family brings the fruit, but nobody ever peels away the awkward. You're left holding a slightly bruised banana and the hope that next week's visit will be just a little less weird. Spoiler, it won't. If you're lucky, you get half an hour outside in the yard. It's a patch of crabgrass, ringed with a fence where patients stare at the sky, make awkward conversation, or simply practice the fine art of not crying. Yard time is the highlight of the day for many, not because it's pleasant, but because it's at least different. The staff refers to it as fresh air and movement, but everyone knows it's really just a supervised shuffle around a postage stamp of grass. There's a path, well, more of a worn loop, traced by countless slippers over the years. You join the parade, taking your place in a procession of shuffling, robe-clad figures all blinking at the sudden indifferent daylight. Let's talk about scenery. On one side, you have a view of the staff parking lot. On the other, a majestic collection of dandelions and one perpetually confused squirrel. The ground is a mosaic of patchy grass, dirt, and the kind of mud that threatens to steal your slippers if you stand in one spot too long. Overhead, the sky feels enormous, almost reckless, and you're reminded that clouds exist outside of motivational posters and poorly ventilated group therapy rooms. The fence is always there. It's not just a suggestion, it's the main feature. Some days you catch yourself absent-mindedly tracing your finger along its cold, chain-link grid, wondering how many hopes have bounced off it before yours. You look up and spot the real residents of the yard. Pigeons, lots of them. Some strut like they're on parole, some peck at the ground, others just stare with the same vacant determination as the rest of the patients. You start to recognise the regulars: Scarface, Stumpy, and the one-legged legend known as Hopalong. Conversations in the yard follow a strict script of institutional small talk. Nice weather we're having. Think it'll rain? If you could be anywhere right now, where would you be? Spoiler, not here is the unspoken answer. Sometimes Frank launches into his weather conspiracy monologue, blaming the pigeons for the unseasonal chill. Millie sits on the single lopsided bench, knitting steadily as if she's expecting a cold front at any minute. A few of the younger patients try to play catch with a ball tennis ball, but it's hard to keep up the energy when your audience consists of birds and a nurse armed with a stopwatch and a piercing whistle. The yard is where people remember how to be quiet, or at least how to avoid the echo of too much talking. Some stare at the sky like they're memorizing the clouds for later. Others close their eyes and tilt their faces into the sun, pretending that the warmth might follow them back inside. The art of not crying becomes a competition. Everyone wins, except for the one guy who gives up and just lets the tears roll while pretending he has allergies. Some days a breeze rattles the fence and you catch a faint whiff of the world outside. Fresh-cut grass, cigarette smoke from a staff break, the distant scent of something fried from a diner across the street. It's a reminder that somewhere beyond the fence people are living lives that don't require a pass for 30 minutes in the open. You imagine yourself on the other side, just walking. No supervisor, no slippers, no schedule. But time moves strangely here. The nurse checks her watch, blows the whistle, and herds everyone back toward the building like an indifferent border collie. The doors close, the sunlight fades, and you're left blinking in the fluorescent gloom, already nostalgic for the yard's imperfect freedom. Punchline. Yard time might feel like prison, but at least the pigeons are free to come and go as they please. Maybe in your next life, you'll come back as one of them. Ideally the one who figured out how to steal fries from the staff lot. Forget everything you've heard about getting a little jolt. Here, electroconvulsive therapy is the stuff of nightmares. You line up, you get zapped, you forget your name, and then you get a cookie. Progress. They call it treatment, but let's be honest, if anyone suggested this outside the walls of the asylum, you'd be calling a lawyer. Instead, you're ushered into the ECT suite with all the fanfare of a dental cleaning, except the staff seem even less enthusiastic. There's a gurney, a faded blue curtain for privacy, which provides none, and a machine in the corner that looks suspiciously like something borrowed from a mad scientist garage sale. It's early. Too early for this, really. The doctor, who manages to look both bored and vaguely apologetic, reads your name off a clipboard while a nurse tightens a rubber strap around your arm just in case. You try to make a joke about not remembering your favourite song lyrics after this, but it falls flat. No one here is in the mood for jokes, especially not the patients lined up beside you, wearing identical looks of dread. You're asked to lie back, and a cold gel is applied to your temples with all the tenderness of a windshield wiped down at a gas station. Electrodes are attached, and the staff runs through their well-rehearsed routine. Try to relax, says the doctor, while another nurse checks your pulse with the same delicacy you'd use when picking out the ripest melon at the store. If you're lucky, you get a mild sedative. If you're unlucky, you just get a gentle pat on the shoulder and a cheery, "You'll be fine." Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for except you. Someone flips a switch, there's a buzzing noise, and suddenly your thoughts turn into static. You might remember your childhood cat, or you might forget what day it is. One thing's for sure, nobody walks out feeling smarter. When it's over, you come to with a splitting headache, a mouth drier than the Sahara, and the overwhelming sense that you've misplaced something important, like your entire sense of self. This is progress, according to the official pamphlet. ECT helps reset the brain. It promises, with all the optimism of a horoscope written by someone who's never left the house. The staff hovers nearby, watching for side effects, which can include anything from short-term memory loss to feeling like you've just returned from a time-travelling vacation, where the only souvenir is a foggy sense of déjà vu. The best part? After the procedure, you get a cookie. Not a good cookie, nothing with chocolate chips or sprinkles. It's the kind of dry, crumbly disc you could use to sand down rough edges on your nightstand. But everyone accepts it gratefully, because when you're coming down from a controlled electrical storm in your brain, you'll take whatever comfort you can get. The post-ECT room is a quiet parade of groggy patients, all blinking at the walls and trying to piece together what year it is. You overhear fragments of conversation. Did it work? Where's my shoe? Why do I taste metal? The nurse hands out paper cups of water and murmurs reassuring platitudes like, "Just rest and you did great," as if you've just finished running a marathon instead of being gently rebooted like a malfunctioning toaster. Back on the ward, life resumes as if nothing happened. Therapy sessions, more pills, the endless rhythm of bells. Nobody talks much about ECT, partly because no one remembers it clearly, and partly because, well, who wants to relive the experience? It's just one more item on the daily schedule, another box to check in the long march toward recovery. Punchline. So the next time you hear someone mention just needing a little spark, remember that in the 1950s asylum, a spark meant losing your memories and earning yourself a cookie. Call it progress, or at least a shockingly memorable start to your day. Today's treatment involves being submerged in water hot enough to cook pasta, or cold enough to make you question your will to live. The staff call it soothing. You call it torture. Hydrotherapy, the fancy medical word for let's see how much you can tolerate before you file a complaint. In the 1950s asylum, it's considered cutting-edge care, right alongside electroshock and cheerful wallpaper. You arrive for your scheduled bath under strict supervision, escorted by 2 nurses who look like they lost a bet. The bath itself is a hulking porcelain tub, more suitable for soaking a Thanksgiving turkey than the human spirit. The ritual begins with a brisk temperature check. "Warm or cold?" asks Nurse Peterson, holding a thermometer with the clinical detachment of someone who's never actually taken a bath in this place. Your choices are scalding, al dente, tepid, regret, or ice bath, Arctic plunge. You can request a preference, but the staff will ignore it anyway. After all, who's the expert here? You, with your sense of self-preservation, or them, with their 10-minute training and a clipboard? You undress, clutching your dignity in the world's thinnest towel, and lower yourself into the tub. If it's hot, you feel your pores screaming for mercy as every childhood sin gets boiled from your skin. If it's cold, your teeth chatter so hard you could Morse code your escape plan. Either way, the sensation is less spare day and more science experiment gone wrong. Bubbles are not included. There's no music, no bath bomb, and certainly no rubber ducky. Instead, you get Nurse Peterson, timing your soak with a wristwatch and muttering the occasional relax it's good for you with all the conviction of a used car salesman. Sometimes she wraps you in ice-cold sheets for that cryo-chamber chic look. Other times she tucks you under a weighted canvas cover that feels like a punishment for crimes you don't remember committing. Let's talk therapeutic intent. According to the little pamphlet taped to the wall, hydrotherapy is supposed to calm agitation, ease anxiety, and restore emotional balance. According to you and everyone else on the ward, it's just another way to pass the time until your next round of mystery pills. Some days you wonder if the staff are actually just prepping you for life as a lobster. The experience is both deeply personal and utterly communal. Across the hall, you hear someone screaming about the water temperature while another patient softly sings lullabies to the faucet. Frank claims that the cold water keeps the government from reading your thoughts. Millie, ever practical, knits a bath mitt with stolen yarn and hands it out as a token of survival. You'd laugh, but your face is frozen in a permanent wince. After what feels like a century, you're finally allowed to climb out, dizzy and steaming, or shivering, skin the colour of boiled ham. The nurses towel you off with the efficiency of a car wash. No spa robe here, just your standard issue pyjamas and a quiet hope that your internal organs will forgive you by dinner. The grand finale? You're sent to the restroom, which isn't a bathroom but a dimly lit chamber lined with creaky cots and exhausted patients. Here, everyone lies in silence, contemplating their choices and hoping the next treatment involves at least one warm blanket. The doctor makes a quick pass, nods approvingly, and marks your chart. Hydrotherapy. Well tolerated. That's a generous interpretation. Punchline. Hydrotherapy might sound fancy, but in the asylum it's a test of survival, one uncomfortable bath at a time. If you're lucky, you only lose sensation in your toes. If you're really lucky, you forget the whole thing by tomorrow morning. Now that's what I call therapeutic. Nobody talks about it openly, but everyone knows someone who's suddenly much calmer and can't remember their own name. You practice looking harmless and pray you're not next in line for the ice pick. In the world of the 1950s asylum, the lobotomy is less a treatment and more a spectre, an unspoken threat with all the subtlety of a shark fin circling the shallow end of the pool. The staff never say the word, but you see the looks exchanged between patients when a doctor walks by, twirling a pen just a little too thoughtfully. Karma, they call it, as if serenity is best achieved by rearranging your frontal lobe like an ambitious jigsaw puzzle. Every ward has a story, someone who went for a routine appointment and came back different, quieter, gentler. The spark gone from their eyes, replaced with a faraway look like they're perpetually watching a black and white TV with the sound turned off. You hear whispers over breakfast. Millie says you should never answer the doctor's questions too quickly, lest you seem agitated. Frank, always the conspiracy theorist, claims to have a list of lobotomy warning signs, which he'll share for half a packet of saltines and the promise you won't tell the night nurse. It's not just idle gossip. There are clues. Mrs. Vickers, who used to recite Shakespeare at dinner time, now spends her days methodically folding napkins and humming Frère Jacques. Or poor Charlie, who once led a spirited escape attempt involving a mop and a banana peel, now so pleasant he nods along with every staff suggestion and seems genuinely thrilled by steamed carrots. You start developing your own survival strategies. Never argue, never raise your voice. Perfect the art of concerned, but not too concerned. Smile politely, but not so much that you look like you're hiding a plan. If a doctor asks, "How are we feeling today?" you answer, "Fine, thank you," with the enthusiasm of someone reading a weather forecast. You become an expert in camouflage, blending into the beige wallpaper, memorizing every squeak of the linoleum so you know when to look busy, never bored, never rebellious. Occasionally you catch a glimpse of the procedure room down the hall, the door always slightly ajar, as if daring someone to peek. Nobody does. Not after what happened to Tommy last month. The rumour is he called the chief psychiatrist a glorified barber, and the next day, Tommy was improved. Now he spends his afternoons staring at the fish tank, clapping for the goldfish. You try not to look too long, afraid you'll get a referral for excessive curiosity. The staff do their best to seem reassuring. It's for your own good, they say, though you notice they never make direct eye contact when they say it. The more experienced nurses have perfected the non-committal hum, a skill you'd like to learn if you weren't so busy monitoring your own behaviour for signs of lobotomy potential. Conversations with your fellow patients turn into coded exchanges. Did you sleep well? Is less about rest and more about checking for sudden personality changes. Everyone watches everyone else for the telltale signs: too much quiet, too much compliance, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. It's a community built on shared paranoia and the unifying hope that the next person called into the office will be someone else. But the real kicker? Sometimes you wonder, just for a second, if maybe calm wouldn't be so bad. No more anxiety, no more worry, just an endless, foggy contentment. Then you watch Mrs. Vickers fold her 10th napkin and remind yourself, you'd rather take your chances with the therapy sessions, the hydrobaths, and even the cafeteria mystery meat. Punchline. In the asylum, keeping your head down isn't just good advice, it's a way of life. And if you hear the word lobotomy spoken aloud, it's already too late. Just smile, nod, and pray the only thing getting poked today is the jello. You're told that crafts will help you recover. Today's options: lopsided pot holders, misshapen ashtrays, or colouring with crayons so waxy they could double as building insulation. Somehow it's the highlight of your day. Occupational therapy is where the asylum's optimism really shines. The staff call it creative rehabilitation, as if making an off-kilter mug will untangle a lifetime of neuroses. The craft room is a converted basement lined with folding tables, art supplies, and the faint aroma of industrial glue. At the head of the class stands Ms. Blanchard, a woman who believes in the transformative power of macrame and never met a popsicle stick she didn't love. She hands you a ball of yarn, some pipe cleaners, and a look that says, "I dare you to misbehave." You take your seat beside Millie, who has crocheted what can only be described as a small army of mutated cats. Frank is across from you, bending pipe cleaners into what he claims is a weather balloon surveillance system. The Morse code guy is quietly tapping out a distress signal on a block of modelling clay, just in case the FBI is monitoring craft hour. You look at the tray in front of you and realise your choices. Pot holder, guaranteed to be uneven, ashtray, even though nobody here smokes, or a colouring page depicting a tranquil woodland scene that will, inevitably, end up shaded entirely in burnt umber. The supplies themselves have a backstory. The crayons are so sturdy you could probably use them as makeshift crowbars, and the glue comes in containers so old the labels have faded into existential riddles. There's a suspiciously short stack of construction paper. The blue sheets always go first, fueling a black market trade in sky backgrounds and amateur Van Goghs. Scissors are blunt, so any attempt at self-expression is strictly child-safe. Instructions are minimal. "Just have fun," says Ms. Blanchard, who seems unaware that this is the same thing people say right before a minor disaster. You try to weave a basket, but end up with something more like a confused nest. Your pot holder is a trapezoid. You attempt to mould a cup from clay, but it collapses into a lump so abstract the art therapist insists it shows promise. Even failure is celebrated. Every masterpiece starts somewhere. Ms. Blanchard chirps, taping your creation to the wall of triumph, a gallery of slightly worrying pottery and finger paintings that looks like an exhibit from a museum of beautiful mistakes. The group dynamic is half support group, half competitive art show. Millie tutors newcomers in the ancient art of granny squares. Frank quietly judges everyone's colour choices. There's an unspoken rivalry to see whose lanyard can hold the most keys, even though nobody has any keys. Every now and then, someone gets too creative, like that time Cheryl tried to build a working catapult out of popsicle sticks and rubber bands. The catapult is gone, but the legend lives on. Somehow, amid the chaos of glue stains, crayon nubs and wonky looms, the room finds a kind of peace. For a few precious minutes, nobody's thinking about pills or group therapy or what horror the cafeteria is serving for lunch. There's just the soft, hypnotic rhythm of crafting, paper rustling, scissors snipping, Millie humming a lullaby older than the building itself. When time's up, Ms. Blanchard surveys the group's output like an art critic at a surrealist auction. "Beautiful work, everyone," she says, as if nobody's noticed the clay turtle with 3 heads, or the pot holder that's actually a Mobius strip. Your creation goes on the windowsill to dry, next to last week's monument to questionable taste. Punchline: occupational therapy may not heal your mind, but at least you'll leave with a colourful pile of almost functional crafts and the knowledge that, in the asylum, sanity is optional, but creativity is required. As the lights dim, the real chaos begins. Someone down the hall is shouting about the CIA, another patient singing lullabies to a mop, and the night nurse is reading a romance novel, entirely unbothered. Nighttime in the asylum is not the peaceful, restorative event you might remember from childhood bedtime stories. There's no gentle hush falling over the ward, no soft glow of a nightlight, just the relentless flicker of industrial bulbs and the unmistakable sound of institutional-grade slippers scuffling down waxed linoleum. The day staff hands the building off to the night crew with the enthusiasm of a babysitter whose only instruction is good luck. Your cot, lumpy by day, transforms into a medieval torture device by night. The blanket is too thin, the pillow is too flat, and the mattress is as forgiving as a cinder block. But sleep is less a rite and more a rumour. Your fellow patients have their own sleep rituals. Frank recites the entire weather report from memory before drifting off. Millie the knitter hums nursery rhymes while creating a scarf that seems to grow longer by the hour. Somewhere, the Morse code guy taps out messages that only the truly desperate attempt to decode. But the real action is in the hallway. Every few minutes, a patient with insomnia, read anyone who'd rather pace than dream, wanders up and down the corridor, muttering about secret agents or the great oatmeal conspiracy. A distant clatter signals another failed escape attempt. Someone's tried to hotwire a wheelchair again, only to discover the batteries are long gone. Someone else is locked in a passionate argument with the vending machine, convinced it's the head nurse in disguise. The night nurse, Nurse Edna, is the undisputed ruler of this kingdom of shadows. She reads paperback romance novels with titles like Savage Heartbreak and Forbidden Prairie, only glancing up when a particularly dramatic scream echoes down the corridor. Her philosophy is simple. If it's not bleeding, it can wait. She moves in slow, deliberate circles, armed with a flashlight, a clipboard, and a level of patience that should be studied by monks. Bed checks happen at random intervals. You get used to the squeak of Edna's shoes and the sudden shaft of light as she peeks into your room to make sure you're breathing, not plotting a mutiny, and still in possession of all issued linens. If you're awake, you pretend to sleep. If you're asleep, she somehow finds a way to wake you up with the gentlest possible just-checking, dear. The sounds of the ward blend into an endless nighttime symphony. Snores that crescendo into full-blown operatic performances, punctuated by sudden shouts, a cackling laugh, or the mournful wail of someone remembering the outside world. The guy in the next bed might be serenading the darkness with a lullaby for his mop, named Beatrice apparently, or launching into a monologue about Area 51. There are moments when it's almost funny, if you weren't so desperate for a few minutes of uninterrupted REM. Sometimes you catch Nurse Edna glancing at the clock, marking time by the chapters in her novel, rather than by any real sense of night and day. The hours stretch and blur, and as midnight turns into 3 a.m., the ward seems to hold its breath, waiting for morning, for pills, for breakfast, for any sign that this sleepless night will finally end. Punchline. In the asylum, the night is long, the beds are hard, and the lullabies are always off-key. If you do manage to sleep, count yourself lucky. If not, there's always Beatrice the mop and the steady comfort of Edna's flashlight sweeping away the darkness, one chapter at a time. Every patient has a secret escape plan, and every plan is equally terrible. The fence is too high, the nurses are too alert, and you're not sure if you'd survive a world where no one delivers your pills twice a day. Still, plotting your grand exit is practically an Olympic sport in here. There's something about watching the orderly double-check the locks each night, or hearing the distant hum of freedom in the form of a delivery truck engine that sets your mind wandering. Some people sketch maps on napkins, charting a course past the security bushes and the world's most bored guard dog, whose only crime deterrent is napping aggressively by the back gate. The favourite time for escape planning is group therapy, because if you're going to get caught, you might as well do it with an audience. Frank claims he could dig a tunnel with nothing but a spoon and his unshakable sense of purpose. Millie, more practical, is quietly weaving a rope out of yarn scraps, though she admits she's not sure what she'll tie it to when the windows only open 6 inches and overlook the laundry bins. The Morse code guy spends his evenings blinking messages at the outside world, convinced there's a sympathetic janitor with a radio on the same frequency. Let's talk reality. Nobody is getting out. The fence might not look impressive, but it's topped with just enough wire to keep everyone honest, and just enough rust to discourage even the most determined daredevil. The yard, your one taste of outside, is watched over by a nurse with predator vision and a stopwatch. Inside, every door is monitored, every hallway echoes at the slightest sound, and the only thing faster than you is the staff response time when someone accidentally pulls a fire alarm. Some escape attempts are legendary, passed down like ghost stories from ward to ward. There's the tale of Billy the Blur, who once made it halfway to the parking lot disguised as a laundry cart, only to be foiled by a rogue sock. Then there's the great lunchroom heist, when someone tried to scale the vending machine to reach an air vent. It ended with a broken candy bar, a broken toe, and a lifelong ban on Snickers. But the biggest barrier isn't physical. It's the realization that the outside world is frankly a little intimidating. Out there, no one reminds you when to eat, sleep, or take your rainbow of mystery pills. Out there, you have to remember birthdays, pay bills, and explain large gaps in your resume. Here, you know the schedule by heart. Breakfast, therapy, yard, more therapy, sleep, optional, repeat. There's a bizarre comfort in the predictability, even if it's wrapped in linoleum and regulations. That's not to say people don't dream. Some patients practice their free world faces in the mirror. A winning smile, a look of nonchalance, a gaze that says, "I'm definitely not planning anything." There's talk of hopping the fence during a rainstorm, or swapping places with a visitor, if only visitors weren't subjected to the world's most suspicious fruit inspections. Even the staff get in on the game, joking that if they ever see a patient sprinting down the hall in pajamas and slippers, they'll just cheer them on for morale. In the end, the great escape never happens. The plans fizzle out with a morning medication or get postponed until the next full moon. Even the most daring plotters end up dozing in the rec room, dreaming of freedom and maybe, just maybe, a vending machine that actually works. Punchline. The truth is, escaping is harder than it looks, but imagining it, that's the one liberty nobody here can take away. So you fold your napkin map, smile at the nurse, and bide your time, knowing the real escape is all in your head. Showers are strictly supervised, and the soap is so cheap it doubles as sandpaper. Good luck getting 5 minutes alone, or getting the scent of bleach out of your hair before your next evaluation. Every day or two, a nurse with the patience of a DMV clerk and the vigilance of a prison guard announces shower time, with the energy of someone reporting for jury duty. There's no privacy, only a row of tiled stalls with stained curtains, half of which don't close. The water pressure is either a sad trickle or a fire hose on a vendetta, never anything in between. Your personal hygiene routine now involves performing acrobatics worthy of a circus contortionist, all while trying to avoid eye contact with both staff and your fellow bathers. The soap is a small beige brick labelled hygienic cleanser, which is ambitious considering its actual ability to clean. It could double as a doorstop, exfoliant, or primitive weapon in a pinch. No one is entirely sure what's in it. Possibly sand, possibly disappointment. Shampoo comes in unmarked squeeze bottles, dispensing a thick, pale goo that leaves your scalp feeling waxy and oddly squeaky. You'll be lucky if the only thing lingering after your rinse is the overwhelming aroma of institutional bleach, which you suspect is pumped directly through the pipes. Towels are provided, but they're as thin as tissue paper and about as absorbent. You spend more time patting yourself dry and shivering than actually getting warm. If you ask for a second towel, you'll get a look that says, "Who do you think you are? The Queen of England." Getting dressed is a race against the clock as well as your dignity, especially since the nurse may decide now is the perfect time to start a full inventory of your personal items. For some reason, all hygiene products are under strict lock and key. Razors are handed out one at a time and returned with the scrutiny reserved for rare artifacts. Toothpaste is rationed like gold dust, and you get one comb per month, presumably because the last person who asked for two is still on some sort of watch list. The mirrors in the bathroom are the kind that distort your reflection so much you're never sure if you're seeing yourself or auditioning for a funhouse act. Shower time is always a social event, whether you want it to be or not. Conversations echo between the stalls. Millie compares her shampoo to liquid regret, while Frank theorizes that the soap bars are embedded with microphones. How else do they know when I'm out of conditioner? Sometimes the Morse code guy taps out cryptic messages on the tiled walls, either a secret code for freedom or a request for more conditioner. It's hard to say. Occasionally a patient will try to extend their time in the shower, desperate for a few moments alone with their thoughts and the lukewarm water. This is promptly cut short by the nurse's helpful reminders from outside the curtain. Let's keep it moving. No daydreaming. We don't have all day. You begin to realize that showering here is less about getting clean and more about conforming to the unwritten laws of institutional efficiency. After you're done, you step out, still damp, wrapped in your threadbare towel and greeted by the sharp scent of chlorine and the cold air of the hallway. Getting dressed is a race, with the ever-present fear that the next person is about to barge in. By the time you're fully clothed, your skin tingles, your pride is in tatters, and you're left with a faintly medicinal aroma that refuses to fade. Punchline. In the asylum, cleanliness may be next to godliness, but it's also next to impossible, and while you may never feel fully clean, at least you'll have the comfort of knowing everyone else smells like bleach and humility too. Some days, the only creature that understands you is the hospital therapy dog, a tired golden retriever who listens without judgment, and probably has more formal medical training than half the staff. His name is Buddy, though patients whisper he's gone by other aliases in different wards: Sir Waggington, Dr. Fuzz, the Bark Knight. Buddy's fur is the colour of old pancake syrup, and, judging by the gentle way he moves through the linoleum corridors, this isn't his first rodeo. He's seen it all. Meltdown Mondays, electric shock Thursdays, and the full rainbow of hospital-issued pyjamas. No matter the chaos, Buddy remains unflappable, a Zen master in a sea of existential dread. When Buddy enters the room, the whole mood shifts. Even the staff stand a little straighter, as if he might be taking notes for the next round of performance reviews. The usual tension melts away as 30 pairs of anxious eyes follow his every move. He's a living Rorschach test. Some people see hope, some see a lost childhood pet, and at least one patient thinks he's an undercover government agent, sent to sniff out subversive activity in the recreation room. Petting Buddy is the only prescription you don't need approval for. Patients line up for their turn. Millie knits him a tiny sweater. Frank delivers weather forecasts directly into his floppy ears, and the Morse code guy attempts to teach him how to tap out good boy on the floor. You discover that Buddy's therapy style is simple but effective. He listens, he sighs, he thumps his tail exactly once for yes, and not at all for no. Sometimes he just rests his head on your knee, and for a moment, the world is quiet. Therapy with Buddy doesn't require sharing your feelings with a group of strangers or digging into your childhood. You just talk, and he listens with the solemn gravity of a philosopher and the gentle tolerance of someone who's heard it all before. He doesn't judge your lopsided basket weaving, your third meltdown of the week, or the fact that you sometimes cry when you see a commercial for cereal. In a world of clipped conversations and hurried evaluations, Buddy offers patience, presence, and the profound relief of being noticed by someone who expects nothing from you except a scratch behind the ears. The staff love Buddy too. The night nurse slips him treats from her lunchbox. The head doctor insists that animal-assisted therapy is an essential part of the healing process, though you're pretty sure he just likes seeing Buddy more than he likes seeing most of the patients. Occasionally Buddy makes the rounds during group therapy, choosing exactly who needs a furry head in their lap. Miraculously, even the most stubborn non-compliant patients soften under Buddy's steady gaze. Of course, not everything is perfect. Buddy sometimes smells faintly of antiseptic and, on bad days, cafeteria gravy. He has a tendency to nap in the sunniest patch of the hallway, blocking the one shortcut everyone uses to avoid the nurse's station. Once he ate a crayon during occupational therapy and had Technicolor evidence for a week, but no one holds it against him. After all, he's the only staff member who never fills out paperwork or asks, "How does that make you feel?" When Buddy's shift ends, he plods off to the staff lounge or wherever therapy dogs go to recharge. The ward always feels a little emptier without him, a reminder that comfort, when you find it, is fleeting but real. Someone always whispers, "See you tomorrow, Buddy," as if saying it will guarantee his return. Punchline. In a world where everyone wants to fix you, Buddy the therapy dog just wants to sit with you. No judgment, no questions, no labels, just the simple healing power of a warm nose and a well-earned nap. Once a week, there's mail. Sometimes it's a letter from home. Sometimes it's a bill. Sometimes it's just a catalogue for products you'll never buy, addressed to someone who left the asylum last year. Mail call is a sacred ritual in the ward, the closest thing to excitement outside of medication time or a surprise pudding cup. At precisely 2 p.m. every Thursday, Nurse Blanche wheels in the battered mail cart, a repurposed laundry bin with one wobbly wheel announcing, "Mail's here," in a tone that manages to sound both hopeful and slightly apologetic. Everyone perks up, the most animated you'll see the group all week. For a brief moment you remember the outside world is still spinning, even if you're not. The first envelopes handed out are always the most dramatic. Millie gets a thick letter from her niece, covered in rainbow stickers and probably full of stories about school recitals and mysterious cats. Frank receives a catalogue for gardening tools, a cruel joke, since the only things he's allowed to dig up are mashed potatoes. The Morse code guy gets postcards from a cousin in Florida, covered in dots and dashes only he can interpret. You get an envelope addressed in your mother's careful cursive, which always makes your stomach drop, equal parts hope and dread. Opening mail here is a public event. There's no privacy, just a room full of curious eyes watching you tear into your letter. You read quietly, trying to ignore Nurse Blanche hovering behind you, ready to confiscate anything that looks suspiciously like contraband. Last week it was a bookmark shaped like a key. Most letters are filled with small talk, updates about neighbours you barely remember, weather reports, and the latest drama from Aunt Linda's bridge club. Occasionally there's a hint of encouragement, "Hang in there," which feels both supportive and faintly threatening. Bills are met with groans and eye rolls. Yes, you're still expected to pay for life's little indignities, even while you're institutionalized. There's nothing quite like opening a hospital invoice or overdue utility notice to remind you that freedom, should it ever come, is not going to be cheap. You try to imagine explaining late fees to the nice man at the pharmacy. "Sorry, I was busy learning basket weaving for my sanity." And then there's the mail addressed to people who have long since vanished, forwarded catalogues for Marvin, who left in the spring, or mysterious packages for Ruth, whose name is now legend among new admissions. These relics are handed around, studied, and sometimes adopted by whoever needs a little boost that day. "I guess I'm Ruth now," someone jokes, and for a few hours she is, flipping through the latest in 1950s home decor as if she might redecorate her half of the room. The rarest, most valuable mail is a care package, homemade cookies, confiscated, puzzle books, if the staff approve the pencil, or a photograph from the outside world, carefully inspected for hidden codes. These small treasures are currency in the ward, bartered for a cup of actual coffee, or saved for a lonely night. The most coveted item, stamps, not for sending mail, but for collecting, displaying, or, once, trying to bribe the janitor for extra yard time. Even if your envelope is empty or your letter short, you read it twice. You fold it up, tuck it under your pillow, and pretend you'll write back, though nobody ever seems to have enough paper, and the staff are suspicious of too many outgoing messages. Still, you savour that brief connection, fragile as tissue and twice as precious. Punchline. In the asylum, mail call is a reminder that life goes on outside, awkward, expensive, sometimes absurd but real, and if your only letter is a bill, well, at least it's proof that somewhere you still exist. The doctor arrives, asks if you're feeling better, scribbles something about not today, and vanishes before you can mention your existential crisis or the mysterious rash you caught from the pillow. If you blink, you'll miss him. Dr. Taylor, white coat immaculate, clipboard clutched like a security blanket, hair parted with the precision of a man who's never had a nap interrupted, sweeps through the ward at exactly the same time each morning. He's flanked by a junior doctor who's still enthusiastic enough to make eye contact, and a nurse who's perfected the art of a silent sigh. "Good morning," he says, as if the concept is not debatable. The ritual is as tightly choreographed as a ballet, but with more confusion and less applause. He moves bed to bed, performing the medical equivalent of speed dating. Each consultation lasts approximately as long as it takes to recite your own name, and covers roughly the same ground as a polite conversation in an elevator. "How are we today?" he asks. Not "how are you?" The "we" is a clever trick, distributing the responsibility for mental health between you and the rest of the suffering world. You open your mouth to explain your latest revelation about the pointlessness of existence or to request a new pillow without mysterious stains, but Dr. Taylor is already jotting down something on your chart. Mood stable, appetite fair, no new complaints. You consider raising your hand, but you've learned that complaints simply mean more group therapy and a new set of side-eye from the staff. He might, if pressed, ask if you've been sleeping. You could say, "I get a few hours between the midnight mop serenade and the 5 a.m. lights on parade." But there's no checkbox for that on the form. "Good, good," he murmurs, making another note. The junior doctor, clutching a pen like it's a lifeline, chimes in, "Have you tried mindfulness?" You nod solemnly, which seems to satisfy everyone. Some patients see the doctor's rounds as an opportunity for performance art. Frank always claims to be excellent, just to see if it makes his medication cup lighter. Millie tries to bargain, one less pill for 2 potholders. The Morse code guy flashes his tongue like a pro when it's time for the "did you swallow your meds?" inspection, then immediately asks for a status update on his theoretical discharge. The staff laughs, but you're not sure anyone finds it funny. You notice how each appointment ends with a flourish, a check mark, a nod, the promise of following up soon. If you mention any new symptom, a headache, a strange rash, a vague sense of impending doom, it goes into the file, to be addressed at the next committee meeting, whenever that is. "We'll keep an eye on it," Dr. Taylor assures you. By "we," he means the junior doctor, the nurse, the system, and maybe fate itself. After the last bed, the team disappears down the hall, still scribbling, already planning their next ward invasion. You're left feeling like you've just been through an assembly line, stamped with "stable enough for now," and sent back to the slow rotation of scheduled activities. There's always a lingering question. What would happen if you actually told the truth? If you described the dreams, the longing, the dull ache for something more than "fine, thank you"? But you know the answer. A polite nod, an extra pill, maybe a referral to art therapy for emotional expression. Punchline. By the time you remember the rash, the doctor is gone, the round is over, and you're left with the comfort of bureaucracy, reassured, rechecked, and ready for another week of feeling not today. Step out of line, and it's off to solitary, a small windowless room where you contemplate every decision that led you here, and occasionally make friends with a passing spider. The room itself is legendary among the patients. Officially it's called the Quiet Room, but everyone knows it's solitary by another name. There's nothing quiet about it except for the lack of distractions and the total absence of hope. It's painted a shade of beige, so uninspiring you'd swear it was chosen by someone with a personal vendetta against joy. The only furniture is a rubberized mattress. No blanket, no pillow, just the comforting embrace of vinyl that sticks to your skin like guilt in July. As you shuffle in, the door shuts behind you with a finality that says, "We'll see you when you've learned your lesson." The nurse offers a brisk explanation about safety and calming down, then leaves you alone with your thoughts and 4 echoing walls. You sit, then lie down, then sit again, experimenting with all 3 available postures until you're tired of your own company. Time stops meaning anything. There's no clock in solitary, no window to judge the sun's progress across the sky. If you're lucky, the hallway outside offers faint clues, the distant clatter of the lunch cart, the unmistakable jangle of the medication trolley, or the thud of Nurse Edna's paperback romance novel hitting the desk. You count your breaths. You make deals with yourself. If I blink 100 times in a row, they'll let me out early. They don't. There's no reading material, unless you count the manufacturer's logo on the bottom of the mattress. Made in Ohio becomes your new mantra. The room is almost soundproof, but occasionally you catch a snatch of conversation or the faint hum of someone else's breakdown happening in the next room. The sense of isolation grows until even the spider starts to look like a promising conversationalist. You try to remember how many legs a spider is supposed to have. 7? 8? You watch, mesmerized, as your new friend, let's call her Gladys, builds a web in the upper corner, presumably to trap any passing existential crises. Solitary gives you a lot of time to reflect. You think about the incident that got you here. Maybe you got too loud in group therapy, or maybe you tried to barter pudding cups for a second towel during shower hour. The rules are flexible, but the consequences are rigid. Here, every infraction leads back to the same beige box, the same sticky mattress, the same awkward conversation with Gladys. Some patients have mastered the art of solitary survival. Frank claims you can pass the time by reviewing the periodic table, while Millie recommends practicing your knitting patterns in the air with imaginary yarn. You try to meditate, but your mind keeps returning to the outside world. The taste of real coffee, the smell of rain, the luxury of a doorknob. The only visit you'll get is from a staff member peering through the observation window. "How are we doing?" they ask, clipboard in hand. You nod, try to look calm and hope you appear at least 10% more rehabilitated than you did an hour ago. Eventually the door reopens and you're escorted back to the main ward. The colours seem brighter, the voices less grating, and your own bed, lumpy though it is, feels like the Ritz. Punchline: Solitary is the Asylum's adult version of Time Out, except the only toys are your thoughts and the world's loneliest spider. When you finally leave, you promise yourself never to return. Gladys, of course, doesn't say goodbye. She's seen it all before. Every week there's a new label. Last Tuesday you were melancholic. Today it's schizoaffective with a hint of oppositional defiance. At this rate you'll have a complete set before discharge. It's a running joke among the patients, though nobody really laughs. Every Monday morning, Dr. Taylor arrives armed with a clipboard and a fresh stack of clinical terminology, ready to hand out diagnoses the way Oprah gives away cars. You get a disorder, and you get a disorder. Everyone gets a disorder. The list grows so long you start to suspect the staff are running a contest to see who can create the most elaborate mental health combo. Some days, it's hard to keep up. One week you're anxious, the next depressed with psychotic features, and by Thursday, you've developed a case of situational adjustment disorder, which sounds suspiciously like you don't like being locked in here. Even the seasoned patients lose track. Frank keeps a notebook of his past diagnoses, annotated with little doodles and running commentary. Paranoia, possibly justified, histrionic, C-group therapy incident, and his personal favourite, undifferentiated something or other. The diagnosis game isn't just a clinical exercise, it's practically a team sport. In the rec room, everyone trades stories of their latest label. Millie brags about being the only person on the ward with seasonal affective disorder in July. The Morse code guy is convinced his fluctuates with the phases of the moon. Cheryl is still trying to figure out if borderline tendencies mean she's in trouble or just really good at hopscotch. There's a strange kind of status that comes with an impressive diagnosis. If you get something rare, you're almost a celebrity. Patients quiz each other over lunch. How many syllables in your disorder this week? And the higher score earns you the last banana. Occasionally someone is disappointed when their diagnosis is downgraded to something more ordinary, like general anxiety. After all, you've put in the work. You want something with a little prestige. And the language. The staff toss around clinical terms like confetti, making every minor quirk sound like an entry in a medical encyclopedia. Flat effect, grandiose ideation, persistent vegetative state. You nod along, adding each phrase to your growing internal bingo card. You imagine, someday, leaving here with a diploma in chronic multifaceted unspecified syndrome, minor in adjustment reactions, and a certificate for most improved at accepting labels. The real fun begins during discharge planning. That's when the staff gather for the diagnosis draft, a closed-door meeting where, rumour has it, they debate which label will look best on your exit paperwork. It's said that Dr. Taylor once lobbied for acute existential malaise, but was overruled in favour of mood disorder, not otherwise specified. The nurses take bets on who will leave as stable, who as treatment-resistant, and who will just quietly disappear into the paperwork, diagnosis pending. All this, of course, is meant to help. The idea is to give your suffering a name, to make it manageable, maybe even treatable. But in here, it mostly feels like a game of musical chairs where every seat comes with a slightly different prescription and a new flavour of group therapy. You learn to answer to whatever label is taped to your chart, knowing it'll change again soon enough. Punchline. In the asylum, diagnoses come and go, but your sense of humour is the only thing truly chronic. You may never collect them all, but at least you'll leave with a full set of stories, a few impressive-sounding syndromes, and the unshakable suspicion that, in the end, you're just uniquely stubbornly yourself. If you're very, very lucky or your relatives bribe someone, you might get a pass to leave for the afternoon. You spend it at a diner, overwhelmed by the noise and wondering if you're ready to go back to real life, or if the padded walls are starting to make sense. It starts with paperwork. Nothing says freedom like filling out 3 forms in triplicate and promising, on your honour as a person of soundish mind, that you'll return to the asylum before the clock strikes 6. The nurse explains the rules. No running away, no sudden disappearances, no unsupervised visits to triggering places like hardware stores or funeral homes. Your wristband is checked, your pockets are emptied, and you're handed a crisp white pass that feels like the world's least festive golden ticket. The outside air hits you like a tidal wave. For a minute you just stand there, blinking in the daylight, temporarily blinded by a sun that feels too bright and real. The grass smells like grass, not bleach. Cars zoom by with a ferocity you'd forgotten, and you find yourself clutching your day pass like a nervous tourist who isn't quite sure how to cross the street. Most people go to diners, those timeless liminal spaces where the fluorescent lighting is almost as harsh as the asylums, but the menu is at least 2 pages long. You slide into a vinyl booth, every muscle tense, suddenly hyper-aware of how loud forks sound when they hit plates. A waitress with a bouffant and the kind of smile that could survive nuclear fallout drops a glass of water at your table. Coffee, she asks, and you nod, because real coffee, unrestricted, non-decaf, is something you've been dreaming about for months. The first sip is a revelation. Bitter, slightly burnt, and absolutely glorious. The menu, on the other hand, is overwhelming. Pancakes, chicken fried steak, something called a jumbo buddy platter. You're tempted to order everything just to prove you can. In the end, you settle for a grilled cheese and a slice of pie. Food so comforting it almost makes you emotional. You eat slowly, savouring each bite like it's proof you're still a part of civilization. Other diners chat, laugh, argue about the weather or their taxes. For you, the background noise is a tidal wave. Voices, music, the crash of dishes, the hiss of the grill. You realise how quiet the asylum was by comparison, how every sound out here is big and unruly and unscheduled. Even your hands feel awkward, unused to not holding onto a medication cup or a colouring crayon. You try to make conversation with your family or friend, someone who's been drafted into supervising you. They ask how you're doing, and you give them the sanitised version. Oh, just making the most of it. You want to tell them about Millie's yarn empire, Frank's weather conspiracy, or how you're now on a first-name basis with a golden retriever who knows all your secrets. But it never quite comes out right. The clock ticks. You wander through a park, visit a bookstore, or just sit on a bench and marvel at the fact that nobody is counting heads or blowing a whistle. You notice things. Children arguing over a jump rope, old men feeding pigeons, the smell of exhaust and soft pretzels. The world keeps spinning, not particularly interested in your absence or your return. Soon enough, it's time to head back. You hand your pass to the nurse at the door, feeling a pang of something like regret, or maybe relief. The asylum's corridors seem less foreign, the routine less menacing. You hang your coat, slip off your shoes and think, maybe I'm not ready for all that freedom. Not yet. Punchline. In the end, 6 hours of freedom is a crash course in how weird the outside world has become and how strangely safe the inside can feel. Maybe next time you'll try the pancakes, or maybe you'll just stick to coffee and a window seat, watching both worlds go by. The paperwork takes hours. The nurse tells you to take care of yourself. You're handed a bag with your old clothes and a new prescription. Stepping out, you realise you have no idea how to exist without a schedule, a bell, or someone telling you when to sleep. Nobody really prepares you for the moment you leave the asylum. It's not dramatic. There's no slow-motion walk to freedom or rousing musical montage. Instead, it's forms. So many forms. You sign your name until the letters blur. Someone checks your ID, asks the same questions 3 different ways, and reminds you about follow-up appointments you may or may not attend. There's always a final consultation with the ward's head doctor, who wishes you luck as if you're heading off to a remote island with only a prescription bottle and a crumpled discharge summary for company. Changing back into your own clothes is its own shock. Jeans feel too stiff. Your shirt is a relic from a previous life, and your shoes, somehow, are both familiar and foreign. You check the pockets out of habit, still empty, except for the ghosts of all the lint you collected during your stay. The nurse hands you a manila envelope bulging with pamphlets. Coping with change, how to make friends, again, and when to call for help. Hint, before it's too late. You nod, clutching the bag like it's the only thing tethering you to this planet. The actual exit is anticlimactic. There's no send-off party, just a quick good luck out there, from a nurse who's already moved on to the next task. Millie knits you a tiny goodbye square, for courage, and Frank solemnly hands you a slip of paper with tomorrow's weather prediction, sunny with a chance of existential dread. The Morse code guy winks, possibly signalling Godspeed or possibly don't eat the tuna. You promise to write, but everyone knows you won't. The doors swing open, and you're outside, blinking into a world that's kept spinning without you. The air feels different, unfiltered, charged with possibility and just a hint of fear. There's no bell to tell you it's lunch. No one lines up for meds or group therapy. You're free, but freedom comes with its own dizzying emptiness. The silence is loud. The choices are infinite and terrifying. You stare at a stoplight, briefly unsure whether you're supposed to wait for permission to cross. The first few steps are cautious. You try to remember how to interact with civilians, what to say to a cab driver, How to order coffee, the proper response when someone asks, "How have you been?" Every small talk feels like a pop quiz you didn't study for. The noise, traffic, birds, music drifting from a store is so much wilder than the muted symphony of snores, mutters, and clinking bedpans. You catch your reflection in a shop window and do a double take. You look normal, or at least like a person who could pass for normal with a decent night's sleep and a better haircut. But you carry a new kind of knowledge. How to sleep through anything, how to survive on pudding cups and sheer stubbornness, and how to answer questions about your mental health with a polite smile and a carefully vague "doing better, thanks." Eventually you make it home, wherever home is now. The bed feels too soft, the room too quiet, and the sudden lack of routine is more overwhelming than any group therapy session. You stare at the ceiling, waiting for someone to tell you what's next. No bell, no call to meds, just you, your bag of belongings, and the endless open road of possibility. Punchline. Release day isn't just an ending, it's a crash course in uncertainty. You've survived the inside. Now you get to see if you can survive the outside. Spoiler, you'll do fine, eventually. But don't be surprised if you miss the schedule, the certainty, and even Frank's weather updates. Out here, you make your own routine, or at least you try. Once a month, the ward throws an art show, which is really just a hallway lined with finger paintings, lumpy clay ducks, and one suspiciously angry depiction of a nurse as a giant cockroach. The doctors call it therapeutic expression. You call it evidence in a future crime documentary. Preparation for the show starts weeks in advance, with Ms. Blanchard from Occupational Therapy encouraging everyone to dig deep and let their inner artist run wild. For some, this means blobs of colour and cheerful landscapes. For others, it means sculptures that defy gravity and possibly the Geneva Conventions. The supply closet is raided for every last crayon, pastel and paintbrush. Even the elusive good glue is produced, met with reverent awe and the stern warning not to eat it. Art time becomes a frenzy of creation. Millie produces a series of knitted portraits, all of which look suspiciously like the head nurse. Frank unveils a mixed media masterpiece, half finger painting, half tinfoil meteorology chart, titled "They're Controlling the Weather You Know." The Morse code guy creates an abstract installation of dots and dashes, which is either a secret message to the outside world, or just what happens when you let him near the ink pads. Come show day, the hallway is transformed. Fluorescent lights flicker above the displays, highlighting every odd lump and unexpected colour choice. The staff pins up each creation with the same care you'd use for a priceless Monet, while the patients hover nearby, critiquing each other's work with the bluntness only possible when everyone's on mood stabilizers. Bold use of colour, someone says about a red and black tornado. I didn't know you could make a duck with 3 heads, says another, half impressed, half disturbed. The centrepiece of every show is always the portrait wall. Here, you'll find self-portraits that range from heartbreakingly earnest to utterly surreal. There's Millie, in shades of lavender, looking suspiciously regal. Frank, rendered as a storm cloud with arms. Cheryl paints herself surrounded by flying spoons. It's symbolic, she says, without further explanation. Someone adds a small crumpled watercolour of the therapy dog, Buddy, looking much happier than he ever does in person. Visitors to the art show include doctors, nurses, the occasional administrator, and, if you're unlucky, a local newspaper reporter sent to write an inspirational piece. The staff smile and nod, occasionally asking deep, searching questions about artistic intent. What inspired you? How does this piece represent your healing journey? Most patients respond with a shrug or a nervous giggle. The real answer is usually, "It looked better in my head," or "I ran out of blue." Judging is strictly non-competitive. Every piece receives a ribbon, most expressive use of glue, bravest colour palette, Best Abstract Representation of Existential Dread. Participation is not just encouraged, it's inevitable. Even the most reluctant patient finds themselves holding a brush at some point, producing something that, with the right lighting and enough explanation, could almost pass as modern art. Afterward, the artwork lingers on the walls for a week or two, brightening the otherwise dreary corridor. Eventually it's packed away, either sent home, tucked into files, or discreetly lost during spring cleaning. The next show looms, and the cycle of creation and display begins anew. Punchline. In the Asylum, the patient art show is proof that even the bleakest places can produce bursts of creativity, beauty, and occasionally art so strange it makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, sanity is overrated. At the very least, it's a reminder that everyone here has a story to tell, though some of them really should stay in the supply closet. Forget reality TV. Nothing beats Asylum gossip. Every cough, glance, or missing spoon becomes a plot twist. Did Nurse Jenkins really date 3 doctors at once? Is the quiet guy in room 12 an undercover FBI agent, or just really bad at chess? You learn quickly that paranoia is contagious. The rumour mill here never sleeps. There's no need for cable or a radio, just sit near the water cooler and wait. The smallest event, a late-night light flicker, an unusual meal at lunch, a pair of shoes left outside the shower room, can spark 100 competing theories. If someone goes for a walk with the head doctor, the speculations begin before they've even made it down the hall. That's the 3rd time this week. She's either getting promoted or being shipped to Area 51. There's a rhythm to the gossip, a flow that matches the daily grind. Mornings are for recapping the overnight drama. Did you hear about the screaming at 2 a.m? Must be the ghosts again. While afternoon shift to more strategic whispering, usually about medication swaps, therapy mishaps, or who might be up for early release. If Frank misses breakfast, half the ward believes he's plotting a rooftop escape. The other half thinks he's faking a cold to get out of group therapy. Some of the stories are almost certainly true, like the time Millie convinced everyone that her knitting needles were government-issued spy equipment. They weren't, probably. Others are pure fantasy, but that hardly matters. Once the seed is planted, it grows. Cheryl swears she saw Nurse Jenkins take 2 lunches last Tuesday. Double lunch is the first sign, she whispers ominously. First it's extra pudding, then it's a raise, then poof, she's running the place. Paranoia travels fast. If you so much as glance at the staff logbook, you're a note-taker, the unofficial, unpaid spy of the group. Someone once suggested the TV was 2-way, and now everyone is suspicious of I Love Lucy reruns. The quiet guy in room 12 becomes a legend. Is he an FBI plant, a chess prodigy, or just an unfortunate soul with a knack for picking the worst roommates? Each theory is more dramatic than the last. Even the mundane becomes juicy. Did someone get extra mashed potatoes at lunch? Scandal. Did the Morse code guy get a new pillow? Clearly a reward for good behaviour, or maybe he's got dirt on the janitor. Who's getting more letters during mail call? Must be part of a secret pen pal ring, or possibly an underground black market banana operation. Sometimes staff get wind of the rumours and try to put a stop to them. Nurse Jenkins denies the 3-doctor story with a laugh that is just suspicious enough to keep it alive for another week. The head doctor holds an assembly to address speculation and rumour-mongering, which only convinces everyone that something truly wild is being covered up. The official denial is just more evidence. If you want to survive and maybe thrive, you learn to navigate the gossip gracefully. Never deny too loudly, or you'll be labelled defensive. Never confirm, or you'll be accused of stirring the pot. The safest move is to shrug, raise your eyebrows and say, you know, anything is possible in here. It's both a defence mechanism and a passport to social survival. Punchline. In the Asylum, gossip isn't just entertainment, it's a survival skill. Reality is bendable, truth is optional, And if you hear someone's running a secret chess club with the FBI, don't ask too many questions. Just pass the mashed potatoes and act surprised. Holidays in the asylum are a unique flavour of festive. The decorations are mostly construction paper chains and slightly haunted plastic Santas. There's a mandatory sing-along, a feast that looks suspiciously like normal Tuesday dinner, and a group therapy session on managing expectations. From the first day of December, or the closest approximation of any holiday season, the staff begin the transformation of the ward. Someone unearths a cardboard box marked Holiday Spirit, crossed out and replaced with Maybe Next Year, and the communal area is strung with sagging garlands, faded cut-out turkeys, and the kind of plastic snowmen that stare into your soul. There's always at least one decoration that makes everyone uncomfortable. The Santa with a lazy eye, the Easter Bunny missing half an ear, or a 4th of July flag that's seen too many group therapy sessions. The schedule for holiday celebrations is meticulously planned, but always goes slightly off the rails. Festivities start with creative time, in which everyone is encouraged to make ornaments from popsicle sticks and glitter glue. Millie knits festive hats for the therapy dog, Buddy, who wears them with the resigned dignity of someone who's seen far worse. Frank attempts to construct a working menorah out of tinfoil and battery-powered tea lights, resulting in a small fire and an even smaller Hanukkah miracle. Next comes the sing-along, led by Ms. Blanchard with a ukulele and an earnestness that can only be described as brave. The classics are trotted out: Jingle Bells, Frosty the Snowman, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Nobody remembers all the verses, but everyone knows the chorus, and the harmony is enthusiastic if not technically accurate. Frank belts out his own lyrics about government surveillance. Millie crochets along, somehow keeping time with every song. Then comes the main event, the holiday feast. The kitchen staff go all out, replacing the usual mystery meat with slightly less mysterious turkey loaf, instant mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce that's suspiciously gelatinous. There's stuffing, heavy on the sage, light on flavour, and the usual green beans, which somehow taste even more institutional than usual. Dessert is a slice of pie that tastes mostly of nostalgia and artificial sweetener. Still, there's a sense of occasion. Everyone lines up for seconds or thirds, hoping this time the gravy might actually be warm. After dinner, it's time for the obligatory group therapy session on managing expectations during the holidays. Dr. Goodwin, wearing a reindeer tie, encourages everyone to focus on gratitude and set realistic goals. The discussion quickly devolves into a debate over whether the pie was actually pumpkin or just orange. Someone brings up the haunted Santa, which leads to an extended group reflection on the true meaning of resilience. Presents are exchanged, or at least small tokens, a handmade card, a candy cane, the world's lumpiest pot holder. The staff give out gift bags with a new bar of soap, a pair of socks, and the kind of plastic comb you might win at a county fair. You try to look grateful, and honestly it's not hard. There's something about being in the asylum that makes even the smallest gesture feel monumental. A card that says Happy Holidays means more than you'd expect. As the day winds down, the decorations start to sag, the tinsel sheds, and the haunted Santa is quietly removed. Patients drift off to their rooms, full of turkey loaf and a strange sense of accomplishment. The night nurse hums a carol off-key as she makes her rounds. Even the therapy dog gets an extra treat, Millie's latest knit hat perched rakishly over one ear. Punchline. In the asylum, holidays might be awkward, chaotic, and decorated with questionable taste, but they are also a reminder that even here, people find ways to celebrate, if only to prove that hope, much like glitter, sticks around long after you think it's gone. Every year, the entire asylum panics as the state inspectors arrive. Floors are scrubbed until the paint comes off, patients are told to act cheerful, and suddenly all the missing pillows reappear. You get a new toothbrush for the first time all year, but still have to brush in front of a nurse holding a clipboard. The build-up starts weeks in advance, the tension humming through the halls like static. The staff begin by muttering inspection in hushed tones, as if speaking it aloud will make clipboards materialize from thin air. There's a sudden surge of activity. Cleaning supplies are rolled out. Windows that haven't opened since the Eisenhower administration are forced a few reluctant inches, and the mysterious stains on the floor finally get the kind of attention previously reserved for security breaches. Suddenly, everyone has a job. Patients are deputized as volunteer helpers, which really means watching the staff try to hide the real chaos. Millie is assigned to help with bulletin boards, Frank is put on trash patrol, and you're handed a mop and told to look busy if anyone official walks by. The atmosphere is electric, half pep rally, half hostage situation. For a fleeting moment you feel like you're part of a bizarre theatre troupe, staging a production called Nothing to See Here. Everything is perfectly normal. As the big day approaches, the staff distribute fresh linens, new soap, and, miracle of miracles, actual toothpaste in tubes rather than unidentifiable powder. Everyone receives a crisp new toothbrush. "Don't lose it," warns Nurse Jenkins, making eye contact with the Morse code guy, who has a history of turning everyday items into escape tools. Pillows that vanished months ago reappear, fluffier than you remember, and only slightly less lumpy than the mattress. Then comes the coaching. "Remember to smile," says the head nurse, demonstrating an expression that looks more like indigestion than joy. "If anyone asks, you're happy with your treatment and the food is delicious," Dr. Taylor chimes in, sounding like he's practicing for a political campaign. Group therapy is hastily renamed Wellness Session. The schedule is rewritten in perfect handwriting and posted on every door. Even the therapy dog gets a bath. The state inspectors finally arrive, clipboards in hand, with the air of people who've seen everything and expect the worst. They march through the corridors, peering into closets, sniffing the air and making notes about environmental safety and patient morale. The staff walk on eggshells. Patients rehearse their lines. You're asked how you like the food. You deliver the approved answer. It's great, especially the mystery meat, while holding back a laugh. The inspectors nod, scribbling something about positive feedback. Inspections mean routines get upended. Showers are mandatory, sheets are changed twice in one day, and meals are served with an extra helping of courtesy. There's even dessert, a slice of cake so dense it could double as a doorstop. For once, therapy is voluntary, and everyone volunteers. "We're a model facility, Doctor," Taylor assures the inspectors as a ceiling tile crumbles quietly behind him. The scrutiny is relentless. You're asked to demonstrate proper toothbrushing technique in front of a nurse with a clipboard, which feels less like hygiene and more like a failing grade in a home economics final. The nurse checks off boxes as you brush. Technique, adequate. Enthusiasm, questionable. Potential for escape, low. You rinse, spit, and return your toothbrush for safekeeping. Then, as quickly as they arrived, the inspectors vanished. The tension dissolves, the extra pillows are reclaimed by the black hole in the supply closet, and everything returns to normal. The floors start to collect new stains, the windows slide shut, and you're back to brushing your teeth behind a curtain of secrecy. Punchline. The annual inspection is over, the charade complete. You survived another year of cleaning for the unseeable. Now, if only you could get another new toothbrush before 1959. Nothing says 1950s medicine quite like being a guinea pig for a therapy dreamed up over someone's lunch break. Whether it's wearing a wire helmet for magnet therapy or swallowing chalky vitamins the size of golf balls, you learn that progress is just another word for try not to scream. Each week seems to bring a new miracle breakthrough to the ward, announced with a flurry of optimism and a stack of fresh consent forms nobody really reads. The doctors are giddy with the possibilities. This new procedure will revolutionize psychiatry, they proclaim, moments before wheeling in a contraption that looks like it was built from leftover parts of a waffle iron and a car battery. If you ask too many questions, you're met with a soothing smile and just relax. You'll barely feel a thing. Take, for example, the magnet helmet. It's marketed as cutting-edge brainwave alignment. In practice, it's a metal cap festooned with wires and mystery dials, strapped to your head while a technician adjusts knobs and pretends to take notes. You sit in silence, waiting for enlightenment. What you get instead is a mild headache, a new appreciation for aluminum foil, and a vague suspicion you're being tuned into Radio Moscow. If the gadgets don't get you, the pills will. The pharmacy is always trialling new vitamin blends, which come in colours that don't appear anywhere in nature, and sizes that could double as marbles in a game of institutional roulette. You swallow them under the watchful eye of Nurse Gloria, who assures you the side effects are mostly harmless, and, if you're lucky, temporary. For the rest of the day, you find yourself humming show tunes and wondering if you're developing a sixth sense or just acid reflux. Some treatments are less technological, more mystical. Light therapy, for instance, consists of sitting in front of a glaring lamp while a nurse reminds you to think happy thoughts. You try, but after 20 minutes of staring into the sun, happiness is a distant memory, and all you can see is the outline of Millie's hairnet in vivid afterimage. Hydration therapy involves drinking a gallon of water in an hour, which mostly results in frantic bathroom visits, and the sneaking suspicion that the staff are just trying to keep you too busy to misbehave. Group trials are the most chaotic. Once, the doctors decided to test a new aroma protocol, filling the lounge with scents like lavender, pine, and, bafflingly, herring. The result was equal parts confusion and sneezing. Another time, everyone was given colour-coded snacks as part of a mood food pilot. You watched Frank eat his blue jello, wait for enlightenment, and declare he was now officially in a blue period. Rumours swirl about what might come next. Will they try hypnosis? Animal therapy with something wilder than a golden retriever? Once, a clipboard-wielding researcher took an unusual interest in Buddy the therapy dog, leading to frantic speculation that canine mindfulness would be next on the docket. The Morse code guy is convinced they'll introduce reverse music therapy, absolute silence at full volume. Despite the uncertainty and the endless parade of oddities, there's a certain camaraderie in being experimented on. Patients trade stories: who got the worst rash, who managed to fake a headache and skip a session, who actually felt better, or at least funnier, for an afternoon. You start to realise the real therapy is in sharing the ridiculousness with the only people who get it, your fellow guinea pigs. Punchline: in the asylum, experimental treatments are just another day at the office. You might not find a cure, but you'll gain a lifetime's worth of bizarre stories and the unshakable conviction that progress should always come with a warning label and maybe a helmet. So tonight, as you drift off in a bed that is blessedly yours, with sheets you picked out and a pillow that doesn't double as a communal headrest, maybe send a little gratitude to the universe that your toughest battle today was remembering your Netflix password, not surviving electroshock therapy and mystery meat surprise. Because for all its mid-century optimism and crisp white uniforms, 1950s America had a truly baffling idea of mental health. Surviving a day in an asylum wasn't just about keeping your wits. It was about dodging doctors with experimental gadgets, laughing at cafeteria porridge, and holding tight to whatever scrap of dignity you could smuggle past the morning strip search. You made friends with a therapy dog, you learned that art can be both healing and slightly disturbing, and you discovered that hope is sometimes just a rumour passed around at visiting hour. It's easy to look back and shake your head at how people were treated, how much suffering hid behind those heavy doors. But somehow, the people inside those wards still found a way to laugh, to create, to tell wild stories, and to survive the absurdity with stubborn, remarkable resilience. That's the human superpower, turning even the bleakest routine into something a little less lonely, a little more ridiculous, and sometimes even a little bit beautiful. So as you curl up tonight, Safe and free, take a slow breath and let the lights fade. Be grateful for gentle mornings, for the comfort of being believed, and for the quiet miracle of a world that, while still full of nonsense, no longer thinks magnet therapy is the future of medicine. Sleep easy knowing you're not waiting for the next bell, not sharing a toothbrush, and not trying to weave your way out of a padded cell. History may be full of dark corridors, but it's also proof that people, no matter where you put them, find a way to keep going, keep laughing, and keep dreaming of something better. Good night, and may your only visitor be a friendly therapy dog in your dreams.